As we approach the final chapters of our earthly journey, there exists a profound wisdom that most elders unfortunately overlook. In the hushed corridors of hospice centers and in the quiet moments of reflection that precede our transition, certain spiritual truths emerge with striking clarity. What if I told you that the most profound regrets aren't about career achievements or material possessions, but about spiritual incompleteness? The renowned spiritual teacher Louise once observed that our souls carry 7 essential spiritual steps that must be completed before our transition. These aren't religious rituals or complicated practices, but rather fundamental soul experiences that bring closure to our human existence. The first of these forgotten steps is the sacred act of spiritual forgiveness. Not the superficial kind we often mistake for true forgiveness, but the profound releasing that completely dissolves energetic bonds. Many elders approach their final days with invisible chains still binding them to past hurts, unaware that these emotional tethers can anchor the soul during its attempted transition. The soul cannot fully transcend while still clinging to unresolved emotional wounds. Spiritual elders have taught for centuries. These wounds become increasingly heavy as we approach our transition. Yet paradoxically, this is precisely when many dismiss their importance, focusing instead on physical concerns or practical arrangements. The second forgotten step involves the reconciliation with one's authentic spiritual path. How many reach their final days realizing they've walked someone else's spiritual journey rather than their own? The recognition often comes too late, that beneath the religious doctrines or spiritual practices they've followed lies their unique soul purpose, untapped and unexplored. Those who work closely with transitioning elders report a common theme: the sudden clarity about what their spiritual journey should have been, accompanied by the painful awareness that time for that exploration has nearly expired. This realization creates a spiritual dissonance that complicates the soul's peaceful transition. The third step, perhaps the most overlooked, is the completion of soul contracts. Before incarnating, each soul makes agreements with others, promises to learn together, heal together, or complete certain experiences. When these contracts remain unfulfilled, the soul senses an incompleteness that creates resistance during transition. These soul contracts aren't mystical abstractions, but manifest as the persistent thoughts that surface during life review. The relationship that needed healing, the truth that needed speaking, the amends that needed making. What appears as simple regret on the surface often represents these deeper soul agreements awaiting completion. The fourth spiritual step involves releasing attachment to spiritual identity itself, the labels, beliefs, and spiritual accomplishments we cling to. Many elders approach death still grasping their spiritual identities as shields against the unknown, unaware that this final journey requires absolute surrender, even of our most cherished spiritual self-concepts. The transition from this world to the next represents our soul's most significant journey, yet how many prepare for it with the reverence it deserves? Ancient wisdom traditions across cultures understood that death requires preparation, not just of legal affairs, but of the soul itself. These forgotten rituals of preparation have been largely abandoned in our modern rush toward efficiency and denial of mortality. The fifth spiritual step that elders often neglect involves the conscious release of energetic imprints left throughout their lifetime. Every interaction, every emotional exchange, every moment of intensity creates energetic echoes that remain connected to us. These imprints, when not properly released, create a complex web that entangles the soul during transition. In indigenous traditions, elders would perform ritual cleansings in the years preceding their expected departure. These weren't merely symbolic acts, but practical energetic processes, releasing the accumulated emotional and spiritual residue from places, relationships, and experiences. Today's elders rarely engage in this essential spiritual housekeeping, unaware that their soul carries thousands of these subtle attachments. Each unresolved emotional experience creates a thread that must eventually be untangled, taught the ancient wisdom keepers. When these threads remain knotted together, they form a net that catches the soul in limbo between worlds. The ritual of consciously revisiting significant life locations, relationships, and experiences, not to reminisce, but to energetically complete and release them, has been all but forgotten. The sixth step involves reconciliation with the shadow aspects of self. As we age, most develop sophisticated methods of avoiding their unacknowledged traits, denied emotions, and disowned aspects. Yet these shadow elements don't simply disappear. They accumulate, forming what spiritual traditions call the dweller on the threshold that the soul must face during transition. Those who work in end-of-life care witness this confrontation regularly. The sudden emergence of long-buried traits, the confession of hidden thoughts, the expression of denied emotions. These aren't merely psychological phenomena, but the soul's urgent attempt to integrate what has been fragmented before departure. When this integration hasn't occurred gradually throughout life, it creates a turbulent transition process. The seventh spiritual step, perhaps the most profound, involves the surrender of spiritual seeking itself. Many dedicated spiritual practitioners approach death still searching, still seeking higher understanding, still trying to perfect their spiritual journey. This persistent seeking creates a restless energy that complicates peaceful transition. The final spiritual wisdom isn't found in accumulating more knowledge, but in releasing the search itself. The seeker must eventually dissolve into the sought, as mystics have expressed throughout ages. This paradoxical truth becomes critically relevant at life's end. Those who continue seeking spiritual completion rather than embodying present awareness often experience a fragmented transition, their consciousness split between where they are and where they believe they should be spiritually. These forgotten preparation rituals weren't reserved for the final days, but were meant to be practiced throughout the elder years. The ancient understanding was that the third phase of life, after youth and middle adulthood, was specifically designed for this spiritual completion work. Today's elders often fill these precious years with distraction and continued external striving, missing the essential inner work of preparation. The spiritual amnesia around these preparation practices stems not from their ineffectiveness, but from our cultural avoidance of mortality itself. By denying death's approach, we deny ourselves the profound transformation that conscious preparation offers, not just for a peaceful transition, but for a life completed with awareness and intention. The journey towards spiritual completion becomes increasingly urgent as our earthly sojourn nears its conclusion. Yet for most elders, a critical element remains unaddressed: the profound healing that can only come through forgiveness and reconciliation. This healing represents not merely an emotional comfort, but a fundamental spiritual necessity for the soul's transition. The eighth forgotten step involves the conscious healing of relationship wounds, those invisible fractures in our connection with others that remain painful decades after their occurrence. These wounds aren't simply unpleasant memories, but active energetic bindings that tether souls together across time and dimension. When unresolved, they create what mystics call soul knots, entanglements that complicate transition for all involved. Each unhealed relationship creates a spiritual anchor that must eventually be lifted, taught the wisdom keepers. These anchors don't merely disappear with physical death, but continue their energetic influence. The soul instinctively knows this truth, which explains why so many elders experience sudden, urgent desires to reconnect with estranged family members or friends as death approaches, not from sentimentality, but from spiritual necessity. The healing required isn't the superficial reconciliation often mistaken for true forgiveness. It demands the courage to face the deepest wounds with unflinching honesty, to acknowledge harm done and received, to release justifications and defenses, to surrender the comfort of righteous indignation. This profound healing work requires what spiritual traditions call soul nakedness, standing without protection before those we've harmed or who have harmed us. The ninth step involves an even more challenging dimension of forgiveness: the healing of collective wounds connected to our ancestry, culture, and historical context. Each soul incarnates not just as an individual, but as part of vast interwoven tapestries of collective experience. The unresolved traumas, prejudices, and harmful patterns of our lineage and cultural groups create spiritual obligations that many elders leave unaddressed. Those who work with ancestral healing traditions witness the profound shift that occurs when elders consciously engage with these collective wounds, how the burden seems to lift not just from them, but from entire family systems. The soul recognizes its role in either perpetuating or healing these collective patterns and yearns for completion of this spiritual responsibility before transition. The 10th step focuses on perhaps the most overlooked dimension of spiritual healing, the relationship with ourselves. The subtle self-rejection, self-judgment, and self-abandonment accumulated over decades creates a profound spiritual dissonance as transition approaches. The soul cannot fully release its earthly experience while still harboring these internal fractures. The relationship with self forms the template for all other relationships, including the relationship with the divine, ancient wisdom teaches. Many spiritual traditions emphasize that the capacity to receive divine love directly correlates with the capacity to truly love oneself. This self-reconciliation involves forgiving our perceived failures, embracing our humanity with all its limitations, and making peace with the life we've lived, rather than the idealized life we imagined. The 11th step involves healing our relationship with the divine itself, addressing the spiritual disappointments, doubts, and perceived abandonments that many secretly harbor. How many elders approach death with unspoken spiritual grievances, the unanswered prayers, the suffering that seemed needless, the divine guidance that appeared absent at crucial moments. These unresolved spiritual wounds create a subtle resistance to surrender during transition. Those who minister to the dying report that spiritual crisis often precedes spiritual surrender, the necessary questioning and expressing of accumulated disappointments with the divine. This crucial conversation with the sacred rarely happens when religious platitudes and spiritual bypassing substitute for authentic spiritual reconciliation. The 12th step encompasses the healing of regret, not through denial of missed opportunities or mistakes, but through extracting their essential wisdom. Each regret contains a soul lesson waiting to be integrated. When these lessons remain undigested, they create what spiritual traditions call soul hunger, a persistent sense of incompletion that complicates peaceful transition. This healing work doesn't erase the past, but transforms our relationship to it, converting regret from a source of suffering to a source of wisdom. The soul recognizes that each perceived failure or wrong turn contained precisely the lessons needed for its evolution. And with this recognition comes a profound peace that facilitates transition. In the sacred journey of spiritual completion, we arrive at the most profound threshold, the ultimate surrender and the conscious creation of spiritual legacy. These final spiritual steps, so often neglected by elders, represent not merely the conclusion of life, but the fulfillment of the soul's entire incarnational purpose. The 13th step involves the conscious surrender to the mystery that lies beyond our comprehension. Despite decades of spiritual seeking, reading sacred texts, or following spiritual practices, the ultimate transition remains fundamentally unknowable. Many approach this threshold still grasping for certainty, clinging to beliefs and spiritual frameworks rather than opening to the vast mystery that awaits. The final spiritual wisdom is the courage to release all knowing, taught the ancient mystery schools. This surrender requires not blind faith but profound trust in the underlying benevolence of existence itself. Those who witness peaceful transitions often describe the same phenomenon. The moment when struggle ceases and acceptance dawns, when the dying person's countenance reflects not resignation, but recognition, as though encountering an old friend. The 14th step involves making peace with the life lived exactly as it was, embracing not just the accomplishments and joys, but also the perceived failures, missed opportunities, and painful experiences. This complete acceptance represents not spiritual bypass, but spiritual maturity. The soul's recognition that each experience, pleasant or painful, served its evolution perfectly. Hospice workers report that those who die most peacefully often express this profound acceptance in their final days, not as resignation, but as revelation. Everything happened exactly as it needed to, they often say with unexpected serenity. This isn't denial of difficulty, but transcendence of the dualistic judgment that labels experiences as good or bad, seeing instead the perfect unfolding of a soul journey. The 15th step focuses on the conscious creation of spiritual legacy, not the material inheritance or even the accumulated wisdom to be passed on, but the energetic imprint left for future generations. Most elders remain unaware of their power to consciously shape this energetic inheritance, allowing it to form haphazardly rather than with intention. Each departing soul leaves energetic patterns that influence the collective for 7 generations, taught indigenous wisdom keepers. These patterns consist not of our accomplishments, but of our realized consciousness, the quality of presence, love, and awareness we embodied. The conscious elder recognizes this responsibility and deliberately cultivates the inner qualities they wish to contribute to the collective field. The 16th step involves reconnecting with our spiritual essence beyond all temporal identities. Throughout life, we accumulate layers of identity, professional roles, relationship roles, religious or spiritual identities. As transition approaches, the soul yearns to release these accumulated self-concepts and remember its original nature prior to all conditioning. Those who work with the dying witness this natural stripping away of identity, how the physician no longer identifies as a doctor, the mother transcends even her maternal identity, the spiritual teacher releases attachment to their wisdom. What remains is the pure awareness that preceded all roles and identities, what spiritual traditions call our original face or true nature. The 17th and final step encompasses the release of attachment to spiritual legacy itself, the ultimate surrender of concern for how we will be remembered or what impact we've had. This represents the most subtle spiritual attachment, often overlooked even by dedicated practitioners. The truly completed soul releases even the desire for spiritual completion, surrendering all concern for their soul's journey into the vast embrace of the divine. As our renowned teacher Louise wisely observed near the end of her journey, in the final moments, all that matters is love, not as an emotion or accomplishment, but as our fundamental nature recognized and embodied. This recognition represents not the culmination of spiritual seeking, but its dissolution, the seeker and the sought becoming one undifferentiated presence. For those approaching life's final chapter, these forgotten spiritual steps offer not burdensome tasks, but invitations to profound freedom. Each step we consciously complete lightens the soul's transition journey. Each relationship healed, each aspect of self embraced, each surrender into mystery creates what the ancients called clear passage, the unobstructed journey of the soul returning to its source. The wisdom traditions unanimously affirm that it's never too late to begin this completion work. Even in life's final days, profound spiritual healing and integration remain possible. The veil between worlds thins as transition approaches, creating unprecedented opportunity for spiritual completion. The elder who embraces these forgotten steps transforms not just their dying, but their living, discovering that in preparing for a conscious death, they finally learn how to fully live. Has this wisdom touched your soul? These spiritual truths have transformed countless lives, bringing peace to those nearing transition and profound clarity to those still walking their path. Subscribe now to receive the complete spiritual guidance series and never miss these essential teachings that most will unfortunately overlook until it's too late. Share your reflections in the comments below. What spiritual step resonated most deeply with you? Your insight may be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. Remember, this wisdom isn't just for elders. The time to begin your spiritual completion is now. Subscribe, comment, and join our community of seekers walking the path of conscious living and peaceful transition.